Okay, I am going to talk about probably one of the most problematic tracks that I've been working on in recent times. Um, it's anyone's guess as to what the problems are, but for sure they're numerous. Yeah. What I would like to talk about today, though, mostly is the weight of the bottom end, and our maybe our ability to manage this somehow. And a lot of times these problems are arrangement problems. Just the compositional elements. It's so nice to think that anything is possible, so long as you can imagine it. But even within a DAW environment, there are certainly physical restrictions, um, especially when it comes to the bottom end. Things are just so muddy down there, and it's easy to have a track like this one that sounds quite rich in the low frequencies, and then just turns out to be an absolute pig, almost an impossible track to mix. So I've done another version of this. This is an older version. Let's just take a listen to it quickly. So a lot of the problem is, I mean, we also have this jazz sample, which has its own issues. I mean, this is a live recording sample, which is beautiful, right? Like, it's no wonder it's inspiring to do something around it. But what I've got on here is a plate reverb already, which is already a reverb on top of a reverb, because if I turn it off, we can hear the natural reverb ambiance happening within here, especially if I don't automate this utility for the input. So turn it back to stereo and kind of listen to what it would somewhat sound like. So I heard there's a lot of room in there already. Like, you can hear the room. To throw this like plate reverb on top is idealistic, let's say. Not to mention that, but when we've got, a reverb that has, a fair amount of bottom end on it, it's already conflicting with everything. And then we've got sends and things like that. So it's just like, it was a big mess. But I was stubborn and I thought I could make it work, and I was foolish. Not to mention that we've got this huge kind of, well, this big pig down here as well. So the best way I would say to go about managing your bottom end, this is the first trick I just want to talk about quickly, even though I've got, I'm going to turn off all of these mastering plugins, first of all, because mixing into mastering plugins, especially ones that manage dynamic range, is something that you're never going to come out of with a sane mind. It's going to be a major problem, because one change to those things, one tweak, and now all of your mix decisions are basically nulled. So here's something that we can do. Let's throw a filter on the master channel, and we can really just drop all of that high information and take a careful listen to the bottom end. Oh yeah. Not to mention there's like a ton of stuff in the mid-range there that also is all fighting for the same space. I think this is a case of too many ideas and not not a strong enough dose of reality for what is physically possible between all of these sounds and the relationship together. But first off, let's just take a listen to the bass and the kick drum. It sounds okay, but there's no room down there. Let's take a look at it with the Voxengo SPAN. This is the spectral analyzer. This is my go-to. The one in Ableton, I've never really I don't know. I don't understand what it's trying to tell me. So let's listen. Let's take a look, rather. Okay, that looks good. But what's happens if we look at the bass and the... So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pan the bass and the kick hard left and hard right. I'm going to turn this into dual mono mode. So that this way what we can do is we can actually see, as long as the underlay is on the right side, we can see both of them together. And we can see what they're both doing. I'm going to just turn these back to default modes because it's been on a slow mode. Oh, where is it? Here we go. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, bass is supposed to have a relationship, like, to the kick drum. There's transient material there that's like supposed to overlap, and we are supposed to have a certain amount of combined energy between the two of them. But in this case, they're living right on top of one another. And that's the first thing. The further we go down into the low end, you know, this being the mid-range or 1K, the more delicate this relationship ends up being. And subsequently, what I have gone and done, and further, it took forever. I've been trying. I basically went in. I separated every single one of these. So time-consuming. If I would have done it at the beginning, having, you know, taken into consideration the characteristics of this mix, I maybe could have headed that off. Basically what I do is separate everything else, separated everything here, turn the warp mode off. This is critical for a kick drum. You're going to hear any kind of stretching that happens there, especially in at the bottom end, which needs to have its as pure a signal maintained as possible. And I basically pitched everything up a little bit. You can see actually some of the transient already starting to peek through in some of those places. So unfortunately, it's also going to require going back and trimming this back a bit so we don't end up with a click there. And so this is what I started with. So this moved it up a little bit. You can see that kind of root note is at least somewhat clear of this bass line. And what we can also see here is that the bass line is sometimes kind of sneaking past the amplitude of the kick drum. I was always taught that this was a no-no. We should always have a little bit more volume on the kick drum, just a tiny little bit. Someone actually said to me once that, like, when you turn the master down on a full mix, as it disappears completely, the last thing you should hear before it disappears is the kick drum. This is for dance music, of course. If you're not making like 4-on-the-floor dance music, then these rules obviously are not hard and fast, but nevertheless. So this did something that I felt made some progress, but it still didn't do what I had hoped it to do. And it was only after doing a bounce, listening to it here and there and everywhere, that I realized the kick was just lacking some sort of character. It just sounded, even, especially with the filter off, when we hear the top end of it, it just sounds digital. And this is when I realized, I remembered that I have actually a little analog filter box unit, the Filter Queen, with a lot of resonance on it. And just this morning, I decided I was going to send the kicks out through the little filter box with the high resonance. And in addition to that, I made a lot of arrangement changes. So a lot of the high frequencies, I went through the low frequencies first, and then I went through the high frequencies. And I made some hard decisions about who needed to be there and who didn't. And I decided to kind of use a call answer technique in terms of being able to thin things out. So if I had like a lot of overlapping sounds, which I did, they're hidden all over the place, like these shakers, for instance. That was on all the time. And then basically I decided, all right, let's turn it off for this section where there's another element. And then once that element disappears, the shakers will come back in, and they'll basically do this for every 4-bar loop. So with this arrangement, after making some really hard decisions, and then I basically took this kick drum. This was the tuned kick drum. I sent it out and through an analog box, and ended up back with a nice solid file that I can see the relationship in. We can see there's quite a bit of amplitude variation between the high and the low kicks, and this also adds some liveness to the bottom end. There needs to be some static elements, I would say, to keep a mix sounding strong, but in this case there's a lot of fleeting sounds, and with that swampy bottom end, it just worked out that I think this bit of emphasis on the 1 and the 3 kind of helped move the groove along. So let's see. Let's take a look at much clearer down in the bottom end. If we apply our same rules with a auto filter, I think we had it sitting at around, I don't know, 1K or something like that. It really works a lot better. And if we take a look at these and we do the same thing as before, now this is the bass, keep in mind, let's put the kick back up here. And we pan them hard left and hard right. We go into our Voxengo SPAN, go to dual mono mode. Left is underlaid by right. Let's keep it on. Why not? Wow, a lot more space down there. Now why am I not seeing the right? Am I not in dual mono mode? Dual mono mode. Hello? What is going on? Oh, my apologies. Oh, we're both on the left, I see. There we go. So now we can see this kick drum living up here. It's definitely given us a lot more space. We can even zoom in down here. We can see our fundamental frequency is probably around here, and we can actually listen to it just by pressing the Apple button. Definitely a lot clearer hierarchy between those two. I might even say that the bass is a little bit low. So we've got something good going on. We definitely have a lot of interesting stereo stuff happening in here. And that's the one thing that is really great about this as well. You can go into mid-side mode where you can take a look at the mono signal versus the stereo signal. Oh, zoomed in here. So this is the red is the stereo signal, the green is the mono signal. And we can see our stereo basically stops at around 80 hertz, maybe a little bit less. That's a really good thing. That'll add a lot of clarity in the bottom end. But there was some other issues with these pads because they have a lot of overlapping notes. Whoops. Basically, I had this one panned hard right. because of these weird overlapping notes that are almost living in the same area. Okay, you know, it sounds cool, right? All right, sure. But the other great thing about Voxengo SPAN is you can check everything in mono, which is highly, highly recommended before you finish a track, just to see what it would sound like if it was coming out a single speaker, like a radio or something like that. Let's take a listen to it. First of all, with it turned off, and then when we turn it on, it'll take all the stereo and mix it down to mono. And let's see it. What we're wanting to hear is if we can hear everything still there. Does everything translate? Does it come through? This will tell you a lot about how your stereo management is happening. All right, so that's without it. That's still stereo. Now, something about the synth wasn't coming out. When I had it panned. Yeah, there we go. We don't get... Something wasn't working there. It was like this before. I'm not hearing that top note. It's not coming through. There's many ways of trying to address this issue, especially if you're using a utility here. You can swap phases on one of them. They're out. Suddenly I hear a lot more now. You know you're in phase when you can hear more. When you hear less, you may be having phasing problems. It could just be the mix, but it could also be phasing problems. So basically, I didn't want to do this. It just didn't sound right there. I made the decision that what I was going to do was due to the fact... Don't ask me to explain why, but when you mix it, when it mixed back to the center, there we go. We got that upper note. Yeah. So that third above there that we didn't hear before. So thank goodness for the Voxengo SPAN. It is an addictive plugin. Like, you can become dependent on it like a drug addict. Seriously, I'm actually like not joking about this. When you can see what's going on, oftentimes you neglect your ears. But in some cases, it's a good final step at least, or at least through the mix down process to kind of check things. Like for instance, let me just go back into a regular stereo, or regular mode here. I can see I'm missing a lot of that top end, and even though a lot of this track is about the bass, it's not a balanced mix. This is a little shelf shifter EQ that comes free when you sign up for a Plugin Alliance account. And it's actually fantastic. It sounds really beautiful. What you basically do here is you just kind of tilt. You just tilt it a little bit at a certain axial point that you would set here. So right now we're like, you know, clearly below our swampy mid-range frequencies, but those are really important for this track. So around 250 hertz, 300 is where you start getting into like some swampy issues. And a lot of times if you've got imaging problems or clarity problems, you can achieve a lot by notching out 300 hertz from places that don't need it, specifically that don't need it. But this track has a lot of stuff that lives down there, and I wanted to leave that, but I still wanted to bring the kick drum and the bass drum into a more balanced position. It's without it. It's just a tiny shift. Just pulls it down just a little bit and kind of lets this live up here. Then we can throw our, you know, a mastering compressor or something like that on there, and it'll just work a lot better. Cool. All right, let's get rid of this. It's not negative right now. This is what I'm saying. It's so easy to become addicted to that thing. So this was our old kick. This is our new kick, and it definitely has a lot more pokey. It just sounds more alive than the other one. Still a lot of elements in here, and this is a major reduction from what there was before. Oh my goodness. You definitely have to figure out who's important and who's not. So yeah, hopefully this helps you, I don't know, come to terms with how piggish the bottom end can be and how much management can be required to get a mix to translate properly down there. Because if you've got swampy problems in your bottom, there's never going to be clarity in the top. It's just not going to translate well. And I think that's maybe a big takeaway, that if anybody does decide to heed any of this advice, that might be something worth considering. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that's it. Hopefully I captured it. Let's see.